Hi, my name is Debra Granik, and I'm the director of a film called Leave No Trace. And I am here today with Max Walker-Silverman, and I'm excited to speak with him about his film, and we're going to get into it.
Well, I'm meeting someone here. Supposed to be.
And who is this someone?
I don't know, really. I mean, I knew him as a kid. Not even sure what he looks like anymore.
Honor just could be to be here.
Yeah. I had so many thoughts about your film. I've seen it twice. I've seen it once in a gorgeous theatrical setting where the screen was perfect and I got to just drink in the largeness of the landscape. And then, of course, I screened it at home a second time. And I love that in both times I was filled with thoughts for the days that followed. So I already know that's a film that impacted me.
Wow.
And I wanted to use the conversation today to be able to ask you some things that really struck me and really delighted me and really wowed me. And, you know, I felt out of the gate that I'd seen a film that was against the grain of anything I've been seeing in the last couple years. However, the sweet part of that is it also immediately brought back a previous kind of American practice, which is this very rigorous, small, tight, minimal film, like almost hillbilly in the greatest sense of the word. You know, use what you've got, make it last, make it do, work with a tiny crew. This kind of arduous, scrupulous, frugal practice. So those were the two big things that I really wanted to, you know, speak with you about. Yeah. The practice and the decisions that you made about the content.
Yeah.
And I guess I have to add, and daring to go against the grain.
Yeah.
So maybe I should start with the nitty-gritty since we're filmmakers.
Let's do it.
With production.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there saying, you know, hit me right away. I was like, single location, special location. Decision to use a single location that extensively and to have it be this contained, unified world, you know, that's a radical choice.
Yeah. You know, it's the funny, like, you look backwards sometimes and start to fit the narrative around things of why choices were made and what became of them. And if I really think honestly, looking back on it, it all is really kind of a natural occurrence, because in many ways it was nothing more than me making a movie at home where I was, and that's sort of the very core of it. But I'm fortunate to live in a home that I found very beautiful and complex and inspiring and bewildering and frustrating, and so that all becomes part of the birth of it. It's not accidental, even though it's inevitable, I suppose, in a sort of way. And I wrote the script for that lake and for that mountain, which I've known my whole life, and I've photographed and wandered in and fished in and met people at, in the same way I wrote it for Dale Dickey. So it wasn't chosen, it was like really there at the conception of it all. And I hope that allows the story to feel specific and honest to what we have, because it was created specifically for it. And I don't know if I would have had the courage to do a single location movie in a location I didn't know. Mm-hmm. But I did believe that there was something solitary and beautiful about this place that so underscored the themes of the story and underscored the themes of the character, that there may be enough of a conversation between all these places and all of these things that something greater could come out of something relatively small.
I mean, across the board in every aspect of your film you do that, but I want to say, now that I hear you talk about this, I'm like, it was no single location. There were these wildflowers at the beginning, you know, out of the cracky dry land. There was the dock, the edge of the lake. There was the foreground, the background. There was the 360. There was when she ascends through the birch forest. There's the top of the mountain. There's, you know, so what am I thinking? Single location.
Well, it depends how you think about it. Like, I saw this movie, Eight Mountains, that came out this year from Italy, and there's this great line that really struck home to me about it, where people are talking about nature, and some character is like, only city people describe it as nature. For us, it's woods, it's lakes, it's mountain, it's flowers. So, yeah, you could think about it. It's one state forest, it's one lake and one dirt road. But like the way I look at it, and I'm happy to hear the way that it comes across in the film, is that there's universes within that, and there's seasons too. It's a strange thing to shoot a 6-day story over a month in autumn, but it's kind of marvelous too, because while we were there, the leaves went from green to yellow to not there at all. And I hope that adds to the evolution of the landscape and the evolution of the character and the evolution of the relationship they have with each other.
Howdy. You know me?
I don't know. You know me?
I think the next aspect of location that we do need to deal with, because it's the white elephant in the room, is that it's a Western landscape. And in American film, the Western landscape has frequently been either heavily stereotyped, right, or reduced, or was, I want to say, wrung out and forced into servitude for a certain kind of pageantry. That frequently involved sort of, I guess, some of the most maybe difficult parts of our history. You know, we have many difficult parts, but certainly how we viewed the West and what we thought was acceptable, and the levels of violence that we thought were entertaining to view over all the better part of us, or the whole century. You know, here you are, tuned into leaf color, to solitude, to the fact that in the week that your main character spends in this location, there is you don't toy with danger to her. You know, you don't toy. Solitude's enough of a high stakes situation, right? But you don't dabble, you don't indulge, you don't rely on this just iconic set of tools to make the West entertaining or exciting. You do it through, I mean, your film has tension. It has many of the necessary ingredients, beautifully executed, exquisitely executed. It just didn't rely on the tried and true of the West.
Yeah, it's this funny thing, like you put a camera in a barren landscape and have a character wearing a cowboy hat, and people will see it as a Western of sorts, which I of course understand, because that's such perhaps the most iconic type of movie. The truth is, it isn't how I think of it, and in fact that's just the place it takes place and the clothes that those sorts of people wear. And there's a long legacy and truth to the violence out there in ways that's been portrayed perhaps honestly and perhaps also very dishonestly. But at the end of the day, if you spend 6 days in this place, I believe the world that we have in this movie is the one you're likely to encounter, which is one of people drinking warm beer and listening to music and talking to each other. And I find one of the more beautiful things we can do as people is to allow ourselves the chance to see things in a gentle light, and allow ourselves to see tough places and tough people in a gentle light, because there's a softness to all of these lives, even if their whole life isn't allowed to be so, and even if it's a few days of it. And it's just what I like, and it's it's what I would like to watch in a movie. It's what I admire about so much of your work, is the willingness, the desire to show people who've lived tough lives, in very gentle moments, or in very redemptive moments, or just simply helping each other out. Like, those are my favorite characters in your worlds, and so I guess I wanted to try and grab some little piece of that.
Well, we have a mutual affinity for just ordinary kindness, it sounds like, and I think after where we've been last certainly the last couple years, and in the extreme form, I think showing almost, I want to say, banal decency, ordinary decency is, I think, received sometimes as a big pleasure for people. I think it's like a really helpful reminder
Yeah.
that a whole lot of people don't want to do each other in, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And that an invitation could be just an invitation without, you know, something lurking behind it that's dark or negative. But that doesn't mean that we have to fly into Pollyanna. I mean, by the way that you keep the dryness and the terseness, you know, it's not like, oh gosh, nicey. It's more that survival doesn't have to always be nasty, brutish, and short. You know,
Yeah.
There's some wiggle room there. But I think something's happening right now when my thoughts are going, which is another way that you work with the West is through your affinity with the music.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciated when I got a chance to read some of your thoughts. I really appreciated how much the music means to you, and the way you described why and how. And I loved your approach to the deployment of music in your film.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to hear a little bit how you made that selection. And I don't want to pin you, but I am interested in the decision to have it be coming from Dale's radio.
Yeah.
You know.
I built a soundtrack as a tribute to the music I grew up listening to, and the music to my parents listened to, and the music that I love. That's the sort of core genesis of it. And then when I think more about why does this music mean so much to me, and in the music it's outlaw country, it's folk, it's sort of getting into the roots of what became country, into blues and soul and gospel. And I started realizing that these things meant so much to me and had for so long, because unlike in Western movies, there's a softness and poetry that these sort of backroad places have been allowed in music that has not really been the case in film. And I think subconsciously or otherwise, that was something that I really wanted to channel. And the movie is a ballad in some senses, and I called it a love song because in some ways, like, it is simply one love song of many. And I kind of like the idea of these traditions trying to say the same thing and never getting there entirely, but reaching towards it and maybe getting a little closer each time. So I think that explains, you know, my love for the music, because I saw myself and what I wanted to do in it, and saw some honesty in it too, about this place that I wasn't seeing otherwise. And I wanted the soundtrack to include these older artists and these legends, and forgotten legends as well, which speaks to the characters and the place and how overlooked they might be, but also newer artists, many colors of artists, in the hopes of demonstrating that these traditions are firmly rooted, but also really very much alive. And it all comes through the radio, I suppose, because I think we've all had those experiences where, as opposed to us choosing a song chooses us. And it's sometimes you're driving down the road and working your way through AM or FM, and something comes along that is like a great experience of art, perhaps, because we didn't seek it out.
Yeah.
And the song came to us, and I really liked the idea of a character who's able to have that be a continual part of her existence, and not just the rare, beautiful strike of lightning that it is for me, but who somehow through the quietness of her life has created more space for those sorts of beautiful possibilities.
That segues so beautifully. Actually, before we go off music, I want to say that I think it is a real treasure chest that you opened, and again, an alternative selection of music that isn't as widely known. So I think you really decided to give a lot of gifts to the movie-going public.
It's a funny thing, like, because these things all start speaking to each other. Like, without access to money, one winds up having to shoot with what one has, and that's kind of strangely noble and becomes important. And the same can be true of music. Like without much money, one has to look for those artists that have been overlooked and underappreciated and therefore undervalued. But that's actually like a really noble effort and like really true to what I want to be doing as well. So yeah, that's the silver lining, I think, of working on with a small budget and some of the odd little gifts it can bring.
Bullfrog was sitting on a lily pond. I'm having her in my arms. Come on, be kind to me.
I hadn't known love before.
Can't you see?
And when it came, it was
I'm in deep.
just so simple.
You mentioned silence and space. So I want to move into that zone in terms of dialogue and what is spoken on screen and the minimalism there. But what is the inverse of minimalism, right? Is space. Mm-hmm. And I gleaned that, for example, Wes, your other very significant actor, commented that for him, you know, that gave this, he realized and felt, and I guess really sanctified that the space would allow people to participate. So if something's awkward between people, but it's not filled for the viewer has to be there, right? Has to enter in. And, or if something's tentative, if something's questionable, if something's where you don't know what's going to happen next, the viewer's active. If the score's telling you or leading you, no chance for that participation, that entrance, right? You're just led. You're not necessarily beckoned, right? Yeah. So I thought that was, you know, very palpable. You know, I think I remember screening way back with an earlier film I did, and hands shot up and said, "Why is the film so quiet?" Mm-hmm. I kind of got a little nervous.
Yeah.
You know, and I heard that. I said that's very real, and you know, the idea that you might hear something, you know, even distributors have to take a risk, right? The idea that you might hear something in the theater, you might hear a cup, a cough, or a shift in the seat. Those are tense things, though. Those sounds are tense too. You know, we forget that's confrontational.
Yeah.
But then I was so rewarded many years later. I was in a different country, a hand shot up and said, "I really appreciate, especially you as an American filmmaker, I really appreciate that there was some silence in your film." Mm-hmm. And you know, I said, I mean, right there and then, like, I just said, "I'm putting that in my journal because I really want to remember, you know, that you could deal with that, that you appreciated that. You know, you're not told a whole lot of steps you're supposed to make as a viewer. You have to make them." Yeah. And so that I really relished.
I mean, I'm just thinking of the way that you used silence, and I think people would describe your work as being so true to the places where it's been. And I wonder if part of that is born out of the reality that, like, there is no such thing as silence generally. It's just hearing sounds you don't hear otherwise. Yeah. Maybe it's the cup in the theater, but maybe it's the wind in the leaves or the crunch of the boots or like the twill of the banjo or any of these things that you've allowed space for that some traditional filmmaking techniques would have maybe sort of smothered over. So that's how I choose to think of it, is what are the sounds we wouldn't be hearing otherwise? And that is place, and that is character, and that is hopefully a space for the audience as well, and a space for the actors. And it seems like the only honest way to also portray people who are of few words and allow them to get to a place where the words they choose are really meaningful, which ultimately is what it's all about. The silence in the film is not because of any aversion to dialogue, like to the contrary, it's out of a really divine respect for it, and that when something is said, it really matters, and that these are things that are hard to say, and it takes time to get there.
Yes.
And it means something once those words are found.
Yeah, I was resonating that with the sentence, you know, why don't you come on in, right? It takes a long time to audition that in your head if you're not sure that it's the right sentence to say or the right move to make. So that I love that this sentence, why don't you come on in, is like a plot point, you know.
Come inside.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and in it, you know, I don't want to tread on stuff that we talk about every day in podcasts, but it does preoccupy a lot of my thoughts. But in a digital era, so I'm going to bring that in, right? To be able to experience quiet with the kind of endless chatter that we're exposed to all the time, right? The truly inundation of microparticles of nonstop input and debris, really, right? To have that space is medicine. You know, you offered again risk at a risk to you, and because it's challenging for people right now, right? To be okay with silence. So I just want to give like a lot of props for that because I think it's kind of needed. So it's not that your film is, you know, I'm going to peg it as this important medicinal film that people, you know, need, you know, shoulds. I don't want to get involved with any of that. I'm just, the grace that you extended is really appreciated.
Yeah, it's that, again, it's like a funny thing of, like, there are, these are, to me, these are real characters, and they're characters who don't have phones and aren't listening to podcasts, and that's still a part of life, even though I've learned through sharing this movie that that's surprising to people, and I've learned with pleasure actually that it's also can be balming to people. And if there's some little bit of solace or inspiration that people get from being able to sit with like the sounds of nature and the colors of it as well, I'm very happy and honored to provide that. To me, it's all just kind of springing from some grasp at a reality.
And now I'm smiling because, like, I think, you know, I felt like your Kaurismäki comedy chops came out a little bit, you know, like the idea that, like, the old stagecoach with the mail, you know, like a Western, you know, a Western iconography brought into this kind of playful, out of time kind of way, you know, that, and of course the cowhands or the very chivalrous and ultra polite local, I guess, family nexus or the kinship group that needed to come and ask about the possibility of some, not land rights, but just land honor, you know, honor and land and lineage.
Ma'am, we was wondering if you might be willing to move your trailer so as we might be able to dig under it.
I'm camping here.
Might you be able to hazard a guess as how long you might be bunking here? Ain't that the truth? We'll see you then.
And it was just interesting to see a treaty or some form of negotiation that wasn't about the possibility of ripping someone off or tricking them, you know. I don't know, it felt like you pulled these things from the Westerns.
Yeah,
with some comedy, maybe.
Yeah, I tried to kind of take some of these situations that we've been taught to expect to, like, fall into conflict and basically treat them with the rule that everyone is telling the truth through the whole movie. And perhaps it takes us a little while to accept that from a film since we're not really taught to, but that was pretty key to the genesis of it for me, was everyone's going to tell the truth and no one's going to argue, and let's see how far that can take us, because there's plenty of other challenges in life despite that, and humor is dignity, so to take that away from a place or a character is it's really an act of dishonesty, probably more than anything, and has to be allowed. And I hope there's some little tribute paid to the quirky characters who make life richer for everyone everywhere, including in out-of-the-way places where, in the right circumstances, they are welcomed and nurtured and part of the fabric of things, just as they are in any city.
Yes, yes. Now, of course, that we've invoked some of the pleasures of your film, we have to get to one of the grand pleasures of your film.
Yes.
Or there, you know, I don't want to make a hierarchy, but that you made a film with two actors that you very purposely sought out because they represent and bring to you the kind of performances and people that you would like to see on screen, or that you felt would be very right for this film. And I can only think that for both of them, it was a very magnificent invitation to come and work with you and this setting, and to be able to work so much from what they bring versus trappings all around them, right? So, you know, some of the directness that you're bringing to other facets of the filmmaking really applies to how you were working with your actors.
Yeah, I mean, I was so lucky to work with Dale Dickey and Wes Studi, who are legends to me and to many others, I think. And it's a beautiful thing to be sitting here with you, because I first really noticed Dale in your movies Winter's Bone, where she's unforgettable, and I ever since then just like kept picturing this actor who was so like deeply real in like the landscapes of my home, I think. And that's really part of the beginning of this whole story and part of the birth of it, and all of the choices that followed, the quiet, the simplicity, was all only because like I pictured this actor who could fill this space. And as you know, to find someone who can really share a screen with Dale is a challenge, because she's so powerful and so good and so distinct. And it was hard to think of someone who could do so, who could really play opposite her. And Wes Studi has this incredible, deeply noble, long career playing so many characters and so many tough characters, and doing it all with such a humanism. And Dale has really had a career that's very similar in so many ways, just endless tough characters with endless humanity. And we later learned that neither of them had ever had a screen kiss, you know. So to have that after all they've done in their careers, and to be able to have that be at the core of the story was such an honor for me. And none of it works without them. At the end of the day, that's their world, and those are their characters. And I don't think anyone else could have given the story the depth, the history, even as the sense of the future that they are with their just presence and ability.
Wow, that is, I mean, I don't know, on a national news front, that's so worth understanding. You know, who gets kissed on screen, whose feelings get acknowledged on screen, whose life is worth noting on screen. All lives, meaning that you are picking everyday people and saying what they might be seeking, what they need, the moves they make are interesting, worthy, rich, but just to winnow it down to, you know, touch and who gets touched and cared for on screen is very, very, it feels earth-shattering. It's
strange, because it's like, maybe it's strange and radical, like, to film, but we all know that it's just like the simplest truth of life, and it happens everywhere, every day. So it's, yeah, at the end of the day, like, I hope to be able to make work that's speaking to people as people, and not work that's just speaking to film as a medium. So maybe that's sort of why I feel like some of these choices can be made.
You know, I do value the word defiance for myself and for filmmaking, for political things, you know, and I don't, but defiance can be reductive. But the reason I kind of am gravitating to that word around sort of the heteronormative aspects, right, of what our what's very much in play and what's really required or demanded or has a market value or has a commerciality, and I feel that you really pushed hard to say, hold up, I would like to be able to portray a relationship that doesn't have a traditional trajectory, that doesn't lead to where the dots are always mandated to lead, and that the way people come together and they part or make left and right turns doesn't have to look the same every time we tell a story on screen.
Yeah.
And I loved that you charted something that we don't see.
Yeah, I take a lot of relief from the reminding myself how infantile film is, that this has been around for like 100 years, and the way that we've generally figured out a 90 to 100 minute story should go has been around for even less time, and there are hopefully like thousands of generations of figuring out how best to use this thing that we're just beginning to tinker with to go. And I say that to remind myself that there's so many possibilities beyond what we think has to be shown or the rhythms with which it has to be given. But as you know, like, to believe these things or to write a script that reflects them is just one thing that anyone can do, and I have to say that I'm been very lucky, and I'm very grateful to also have met people who are willing to support that. The crew who I work with, who I went to film school with, who understand this and want to be part of it. Financiers who were able, understood this, supported it. Bleecker Street, who was happy to take it and show it around.
Awesome.
Everyone it takes so many people every step of the way, and me typing these things on a computer is only a little piece of it. So just very, very grateful for all of that, and I think it shows in a beautiful way that you and I are not the only people who are into these things, and in fact there is a community for it, maybe a market for it, an audience for it.
Oh, well, I then thank you for making that very clear and evident and pushing it forward, slipping it into the arena so that we can ask ourselves, how do we keep that appetite going, and how do we find the allies, like you said, in distribution and the other places in the, in the so-called industry or in the film world that have to be allied occasionally to let less conventional work be out and about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Niche audiences.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Yeah, it is. I mean, I think I have to imagine that if one was making movies right now and hoping to like define a summer or be a key piece of a zeitgeist for a period of time, it would be a very frustrating thing to do. There's 7 billion people in the world and infinite media markets and ways that we all connect or don't connect with each other. I don't really know if there is a zeitgeist or like a pulp culture actually, but my experience has been is that if one is happy to do something small and share it with a group of people who are likely to appreciate it, however many or few, like, it's a really rewarding moment and full of possibilities, and I'm allowing myself to be very happy with that. I always remember someone once told me, like, you make art for your friends, and if anyone else likes it, it's a bonus, and I've tried to hold true to that, and it's steered me well so far.
Oh, well, I think you're going to make many friends with this film.
Thanks.
This was great talking to you today.
It's such a pleasure. I'm really, really honored to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Mutual. I encourage you to come see A Love Song in theaters, if you can, because you will be greatly rewarded. It's a gem of a film on all fronts. See it as soon as possible.